In this day and age, in the toxic world in which we live, it is highly, highly recommended. I can't overstate this, that if you are in recovery from anything, and everybody's in recovery from something, bring yoga and meditation and breath work into your life. It's critically important. Otherwise, we run the risk of living in our stories for a lifetime. And what a tragedy that would be. All right, I see that Celeste has raised her hand. So hi, Celeste, let's dive right in.
Hi, Tommy. It's good to be here. So my question probably won't surprise you, but what do you think the role of trauma plays in addiction? What do you think happens there? And how can yoga and pranayama and meditation and all of the tools of yoga and yoga therapy help people with trauma and addiction issues?
Beautiful question. Beautiful inquiry. Bringing trauma into this discussion, so important. So important. So thank you for this. Let's begin with some definitions or try to understand what we're talking about. I'm looking at trauma as unfinished business. Energetically, mentally, emotionally, even spiritually. It's a resonance, a deeply imprinted resonance that remains from something that we carry from the past. It's not so much the thing that happened as our experience of it and what we held from it and what we continue to hold today. Trauma and resentment are close in a sense. They can go hand in hand. Resentment to feel over and over again. In a traumatized state, one feels or re-experiences an original incident again and again and again. The interesting thing about this time right now is that as a society, we have adopted this term and applied it to a feeling that someone carries about almost anything that's ever happened that could be cast in a negative light. I have trauma from my childhood. I hear this a lot from so many people. And there's a difference between having been traumatized and carrying trauma through one's life. There's a big difference there, and I think it's an important thing to look at. So we'll come to that in a moment. I'm interested in freedom. I want to be fully present for this life. And I believe that my bliss, my joy, my life is here and now, in the present, in this moment right now. The purpose of my life right now is to interact with you. That is the sole purpose of my life. What else could my life possibly be about? This is what is here right now. This is the activity. Let us engage in it fully with each other. Your purpose in life is to listen to me right now and for us to be in this inquiry together. I don't mean that from an arrogant perspective. I mean, this is what we've both chosen to do in this moment, in this here, in this now. Whatever thoughts or emotions, energy, memory, pull us out of this moment into the designated temporal place that we refer to as the past is something that is keeping us in any given moment from being fully present. And as we get caught in our thinking or get caught in our memory, or get caught in our energy, our trauma or our resentment, we're drawn away from the present moment. We can't experience presence and we can't experience freedom. But we can catch ourselves. We can catch ourselves being drawn away from the present moment. Much like in meditation, when thoughts arise and 15 minutes later, we're like, I was just thinking for 15 minutes. Where have I been? Oh, I'm not here and not now. I got attached to those thoughts and I got attached to that thinking. And that's something that I do. Now, people who have experienced severe trauma like earlier in their life. So for example, people who have been beaten, physical trauma, sexual trauma, emotional trauma, people who have been disempowered, people who have been disenfranchised, people for whom opportunities have not been present and have been taken away, people who have been imprisoned or enslaved. These kinds of things are the kinds of things that I think that we think of as a society when we think about, oh, that person has trauma. They have severe trauma. They have PTSD, someone who's been in a war situation. Soldiers who have experienced the horrors of war carry PTSD. And so the connection there is that if you are anxious, worried, stressed, depressed, rageful, angry, if that's your experience of yourself, if you're stuck in that pattern because of trauma, you will do something to get yourself out of it. You absolutely are going to do something, whether that's drugs and alcohol, acting out sexually, acting out violently, acting out passive-aggressively, turning it all inward and becoming depressed, suppressing your emotions, repressing your emotions, no expression, all of that leading to depression. But it's coming out sideways, some way, shape, or form. Because what we do is we try to bring ourselves to homeostasis. We try to bring ourselves to balance. So if you're being driven by trauma, a severe trauma in your life, that pattern has to be broken through. You have to break out of that pattern. How does it happen? It happens at multiple levels of the human being. It happens at the energetic level in the body. So there we're talking about the soma, the intelligence of the body, the somatic aspect of our being. It happens in the mind, the mental body. It happens in the spirit, a sense of being shut down, not present, not loving, not able to receive or give love. It happens at every level. In order to break out of something like that and to not act out and to stay stuck in that pattern, one is going to need an extremely powerful technology. And the technology that I'm aware of is called yoga. In the broadest sense of the term yoga, meditation, chanting and singing, moving the body, processing the issues out of the tissues, taking care of that stuckness and that frequency constipation, if you will, at the body level. Somatic experiencing is a therapy. That's a beautiful therapy for breaking out of this frequency, this stuckness that we're talking about. For sure, it's important also to talk and to have the powerful connection with a therapist, a wise therapist who understands trauma, so that one can break out of that frequency, which leads them to some addictive behavior or another. Not because they're bad people, but because they are seeking to deal with a trauma, unfinished business in the mind-body system that creates tremendous pain. The frequency and the stuckness is what we're referring to as addiction. The addictive behavior gets laid on top of the addiction. And guess what? The addictive behavior is usually further traumatizing. I know people who did not have trauma like what I'm describing at all, who had reasonably amazing childhoods, but they had something happen at some point that disconnected them from their self. And let's say that when you're disconnected from yourself, that's a trauma of sorts. And that's enough for someone to begin to use drugs or alcohol and to get into a pattern with it and then to become addicted to it and then to experience the trauma of addiction on top of an original insult, if you will. So you see this connection with trauma and addiction and resentment. It's all there. So we as a society, we're using this word right now a lot. And I get it. And it also concerns me. And I'll tell you why it concerns me. I want to make certain that people don't get stuck in the label of it any more than people get stuck in the label of addict, alcoholic. I don't want people to use that as an excuse for staying the same in their behavior, as an explanation. Well, this is how I am because this is what happened to me. Let me tell you about my story of trauma. Now, it's important. It's important that the story be told. But as my friend Deborah Silverman says, we don't want the story to be, what does she say? It's important that the story be told, but not cemented into reality and worn like a badge of courage. Well, if you only knew about my story of trauma. Now, what I would say to a person who has been severely traumatized, where some of the things like sexual abuse and physical abuse, emotional abuse have taken place, I don't want to diminish the unbelievably painful experience that must have been for that person. I just don't want the person to stay there for a lifetime behind a story that says, this is why I am the way I am, and I'll always be the way I am, because if you only knew what happened to me, you'll understand why I'm the way I am, and then there's a justification going on. And then there's multiple levels of this where, of course, there's many, many people in the world who haven't experienced these kinds of traumas, but who have experienced some challenges in life and have had difficult things happen. Maybe they lost a parent or a loved one at a very young age, and that was incredibly painful. And there's something still left there that needs to be dealt with. Absolutely. We just want to be very careful about the story that we're telling ourselves. It's good to understand that something difficult took place. Really important to understand this thing that took place is still affecting me now. And if we can see that and become aware of that behavior, then we can do something about it, work through it, process it, learn from it, eventually, when we've done the work that needs to be done, heal it and then transcend it altogether. Now, in 32 years, I've been to thousands of 12-step meetings. I've heard a lot of people share. And it's very easy at this point to tell the difference between somebody who's sharing that's still gripped in their story and somebody who's sharing that has transcended their story and healed from it, but is sharing from a place of wholeness. What I wish for every one of us is to heal and process and transcend the challenges of our past so that we can become fully present, not be dominated by the things that took place, but be informed by them, be awakened by them, learn from them, and have that be an aspect of our experience in this life, but they no longer define us. Lastly, before I want to hear from you once again, there's a wonderful teacher who lives in India named Sadhvi Ji. And she's an American-born, extremely wise, loving, caring, beautiful, amazing, radiant human being. And she tells a story from her personal life about finding her teacher, her guru in India. And they had the talk at one point after they had just gotten to meet each other. They had the talk in their early relationship when she was able to tell him her story. And it was her story of, this had happened to her and this horrible sexual abuse had happened, which she's written about very publicly, which is why I can bring it up here. Pretty much why it was okay for her to be so caught up, so unhappy. And he said to her, well, how long do you plan on carrying this story? Would you like to let go of it the day before you die? And she was like, no. And he was like, well, how about a week before? How about 1 week before you die? You can keep it. You keep the story till then. And she said, no. And he said, good. Why don't you let go of the story now? And let's approach it from a different energy, from a place of surrender, from a place of integration, from a place of release, from a place of faith and love. Let's come into acceptance with what has been and allow ourselves to forgive eventually, appropriately, to do the work, and to release and let it go. And that was a life-changing conversation for her. And she literally never looked back. Never looked back again in the same way. So these are some of my thoughts in terms of yoga and meditation, breath work. In this day and age, in the toxic world in which we live, it is highly, highly recommended. I can't overstate this, that if you are in recovery from anything, and everybody's in recovery from something, bring yoga and meditation and breath work into your life. It's critically important. Otherwise, we run the risk of living in our stories for a lifetime. And what a tragedy that would be. So these are the things that initially come to my mind, dear Celeste. What comes up for you as we are discussing and exploring this?
Well, I think Tommy, that I'm on the same wavelength as you are with this. There's no question that that things can change for trauma survivors. It doesn't have to stay the same. It is like that. Well, but this is what happened to me, and you can either live with what happened to me or you can live your life. And you want to live in the past. You want to really live. There's, yoga for me was what opened the door. And if it hadn't been for yoga, I don't know where I'd be at this point in my life. It was what saved me. That sense of, oh my God, this is different was amazing for me. I started taking yoga classes about 25 years ago. And the reason I started yoga classes was because I couldn't run anymore and I couldn't work out at the gym anymore and everything hurt and I was miserable. And those are the physical effects of trauma when it stays within your body. That's what happens physically. And so what I found out in taking yoga, initially gentle classes, couldn't do much, but working through that, I started to realize something that we now call dissociation, which was I couldn't make sense of what instructors were telling me to do. And I had to look around to try to figure out what to do now. But it was good because it made me aware that I wasn't aware. And that was kind of the place where I was working on changing that because it really pissed me off.
Sure.
And, what do you mean I can't listen and hear it and get it? Knowing that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that we don't have to live like that anymore. That's the gift. I didn't have a substance issue. I was addicted to mind-altering men. That's my story. Mind-altering people, mind-altering relationships, things that just really didn't work. And I didn't know how to change that. It is an addictive pattern. We go back to the same things over and over again because we don't know what else to do. Being able to see that and be able to shift it and change it and work with it, that's huge. That's huge. And I so appreciate the work that you do. It makes a huge difference for the people that get to hear you and get to listen to you and get to find a different path through. Because my personal belief, is that addiction happens, all of those addictions originate within a traumatic system that we're stuck in, that we don't know how to get out of, that we're really uncomfortable, and that addiction becomes a crutch, at least for a time being. And getting out of that is the best thing we can ever do for ourselves.
Well, thank you so much, Celeste. I'm just reminded that there is such an isolating element to trauma.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's so powerful, the antidote obviously, is community.
It is.
And to truly be able also to be amongst people and not be trapped in the thing, the energy, the dissociation, the whatever the thing is. And so that return to community, that movement from isolation into community, integration is so, that's the ticket, that's recovery right there. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm super grateful for you and for this inquiry. And for anybody who really feels like they're struggling and caught in their head and feels alone and feels cut off, there is a way through every block. And come and be closer to us all. And there's meetings and there's therapy and there's yoga classes and there's meditation and there's breath work. There's so many options today to begin to crack through whatever is holding you stuck in a story that no longer serves you. All of us, meaning the greater community of people in the universe who are in recovery, not just Recovery 2.0, I mean all of us, will welcome you with open arms. So come find us, please.